Good morning and Shana Tova. I welcome you all to our second day Rosh Hashana morning services at Congregation Beth-El in Indianapolis, Indiana. I am Rabbi Dennis Sasso, and with me on the bima, Rabbi Jenny Greenspan and Cantor Melissa Cohen. We welcome you to our celebration of Rosh Hashanah and invite you to follow in the prayer book. We are using the Machzor Lev Shalem for those of you who have it at home with you. If you do not, we regret we don't have this in the website for you, but just follow along and join us in prayer as we welcome a new year. We begin to do so on page 37 with the Birchot HaShachar, the morning blessings of thanksgiving for a new day. Page 37.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lasekvina lefkin ben yom uven laila.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani b'tzalmo.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani bat chorim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish arumim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir hasurim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokek kefufim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rokah haaretz al hamayim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa li kol tzorki.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, המכין מצעדי גבר.
Amen.
ברוך אתה, אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, עוזר ישראל בגבורה.
Amen.
ברוך אתה, אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, עוזר ישראל בתפארה.
Amen.
ברוך אתה, אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, הנותן ליעף כוח.
Amen. We turn to page 47, Baruch She'amar, a celebration of God's creative powers. Rosh Hashanah is Yom Harat Olam, the day of the creation of the world.
Baruch she'amar ve'haya ha'olam, Baruch hu, Baruch oseh v'reshit,
Baruch Omer ve'oseh,
Baruch gozer u'mekayim,
Baruch merachem al ha'aretz,
Baruch merachim al habriot,
Baruch meshalem sakar tov lireav,
Baruch haylad v'kayam lanatzach,
Baruch podeh umatzil.
Baruch Shemo.
Continue on page.
יחיצחי העולמים, מלך משובח ומפאר הדעת, עמו הגדול שמו הגדול, ברוך אתה אדוני.
Baruch hu, Baruch Shemo.
מלך מהולל, ותשבחו.
Amen. Page 67. Nishmat kol chai tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. The soul of all that lives praises your name, Adonai. The spirit of all flesh exalts your sovereignty always. And we will praise, acclaim, bless your holy name, fulfilling David's words, Barchi nafshi et Adonai. Bless the eternal, O my soul. Let every fiber of my being praise God's holy name. We turn to page 69 and introduce the morning service for Rosh Hashanah, HaMelech.
האל בית עצומות עוזך הגדול בכבוד שמך הגיבור לנצח, ונורא בנורותיך, המלך יושיב על כיסא רם ונישא, שוכן עד מרום וקדוש שמו, וכתוב רננו צדיקים באדוני, לישרים ענווה תהילה. בפי ישרים תתהלל, ודברי צדיקים תתברך, ובלשון חסידים תתקדש, ובקרב קדושים תתהלל. ובמקלות רביבות עמך, בית ישראל לברינה יתבר, שמך מלכנו בכל דור ודור. ברכות והודעות מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני,
ברוך הוא ברוך שמו.
אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל הודעות אדון הנפלאות, הבוקר בשירי זמרה מלכי העולמים.
Please rise. We continue with Hatzi Kaddish, page 71. 70.
יתקדל ויתקדש מרבה,
Amen.
בעלמא דברכנותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו
Amen.
יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך, וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמיד קודשה
בריחו
לעילה לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תאמירן בעלמא ואמרו Amen.
Page 71, the Baruch Hu, the call to morning prayer.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך,
Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל עולם, ויוצר חיים אורות מאופן, אמר ויחי.
Blessed are you, Adonai, ruler of time and space, who forms light, creates darkness, and brings harmony to all creation. The eternal light is found in the treasury of life, as God said, "Let there be light from the darkness," and so it was. May be seated. We turn to page 76, having acknowledged and given thanks for the physical universe in which we live. We give thanks for the gift of Torah, which guides our steps in the world. You have loved us deeply, Adonai, our God, and shown us boundless compassion. Avinu Malkenu, for the sake of our ancestors who trusted in you and whom you taught laws of life, be gracious to us as well. Instruct us, compassionate Creator, care for us. Cause our hearts to understand and discern, to hear, study, teach, observe, fulfill, and perform with love all the teachings of your Torah. Continue silently.
וקירבתנו לשמך הגדול לסלע, באמת להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה Baruch atah Adonai.
Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo.
הבוחר בעמו ישראל, באהבה.
Amen. We rise and we join in the affirmation of faith, the Shema, page 77.
שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
Baruch Shem Kevod Malkuto Leolam Vaed.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבביך ובכל נפשך ובכל מיעוטך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך ביד. ויאמר אדוני למשה לאמור.
Remember then to fulfill all my mitzvot and be holy unto your God. I am Adonai your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai your God in truth. May be seated, and we turn to page 80, joining in the words that Moses, Miriam, and the Israelites sang on their journey to freedom, Mi Chamocha.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, שירה חדשה שבחור גאולים לשמך על שפת הים יחד כולם. הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל חומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדי קנומך יהודה וישראל. גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני
Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo.
גאל ישראל.
Amen. We turn to page 81 and invite those of you who are able to rise as we continue with the Amida.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, v'Eloi avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor VeHanora, El Elyon, Omel Chasadim Tovim, Vekonei Hakol, Vezocher, Chasdei Avot Ve'imot, ומביא גורל לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. מסוד חכמים ונבונים ומלמד דעת מבינים הבטחתי בתפילה ובתקנונים לחלות ולכונן פני מלך מלכי המלכים ואדוני האדונים.
Remember us for life, O Sovereign who delights in life, and inscribe us in the book of life, for your sake, O God of life.
זוכרינו לחיים, מלך חפץ החיים, וכותבנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים החיים. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני.
Baruch hu Baruch Shemo.
מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה.
Amen.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מקיים את מטריו להושיע, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מקיים מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך, אהב הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ברחמים, ונאמנתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני,
Baruch hu Baruch Shemo.
מחיי המתים.
Amen.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. ואתה קדוש יושיב, תהילות ישראל, תהילות ישראל.
From one generation to another, we declare your greatness and sanctify your name in words of holiness. We turn to the Kedusha, page 86.
ובכן, ולך תעלה קדושה, כי אתה אלוהינו מלך, נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי אהרון, ככתוב על יד נביאיך, וכרזה אל זה, ואמר,
קדוש, קדוש, קדוש,
אדוני צבאות,
מלוך כל הארץ
כבודו. אז בקודש קדוש, אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, מתנסים לעומת שרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומך מלכנו תודיע, ותמלוך עלינו, כי מתקים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון, וקרוב בימינו, לעולם ועד תשכון, תתקדל ותתקדש, בתוך ירושלים, עירך, לדור ודור, ולנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה, תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך. על ידי דוד על ידי דוד משיח צדקך, על ידי דוד, על ידי דוד משיח צדקך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. את שבחך אלוהינו מבינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה.
We continue silently from page 87 through page 91 with the remainder of the Amida, and to the tradition, the words of tradition, you may add the prayer and the meditation that is in your own hearts. We turn to the concluding blessing for peace of the Amida on page 91. Our God and God of our ancestors, bless us with the threefold blessing of the Torah, written by Moses your servant and recited by Aaron and his descendants, the ancient consecrated priests of your people. Yevarechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha, may God bless and protect you. Yair Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka, may God's countenance shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom, may God's countenance be lifted towards us and grant us peace. Ken yehi ratzon. May we and the entire house of Israel be called to mind and inscribed for life, blessing, sustenance, and peace in the book of life. Besefer Chayim.
בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה, להיזכר ולהיכתב לפניך, אנחנו וכולך בית ישראל. לחיים טובים, לחיים טובים ולשלום. ברוך אתה אדוני,
Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo.
עושה השלום.
Amen. May remain standing as the doors of the Aron HaKodesh are opened, and we turn to the recitation of Avinu Malkenu on page 92.
Avinu Malkenu, Chatanu lefanecha.
Avinu Malkenu aseiman leman shmecha. Avinu Malkenu aseiman leman shmecha. Avinu Malkenu kotvenu besefer chayim tovim. Avinu Malkenu, inscribe us for a good in the book of life. Avinu Malkenu kotvenu besefer geula v'yeshua. Avinu Malkenu, inscribe us in the book of redemption. Avinu Malkenu, inscribe us in the book of sustenance. Avinu Malkenu, inscribe us in the book of merit. Avinu Malkenu, inscribe us in the book of forgiveness. Avinu Malkenu, kotvenu besefer selicha umechila. Avinu Malkenu, have mercy on us. Answer us, for our deeds are insufficient. Deal with us in kindness and with love, and redeem us. We join in the closing verse of Avinu Malkenu, page 93.
Avinu Malkenu, Chanenu v'hanenu. Avinu Malkenu, Chanenu v'hanenu, ki in banu mercy. Aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed, le'oshenu. Avinu Malkenu, Chanenu v'hanenu. Avinu Malkenu, Chanenu v'hanenu, ki ein banu mercy.
As the doors of the Aron HaKodesh are closed, you may be seated. We're going to be turning to the Torah service in a few moments. Rabbi Jenny already gave words of introduction to yesterday's Torah reading, which serves also as an introduction to this second day's Torah reading. The two passages from Genesis 21 and Genesis 22 constitute a sequel. As we read the Torah and the Haftarah on this Rosh Hashanah second day, but significantly in both days, two themes, I think, rise to our consciousness and attention. One is the precariousness of our existence, and that is signified by the impending sacrifice of Isaac, which is not consummated as a result of the angel coming in just at the right time, and Abraham's hearing and saying, Hineni, here I am. So the first theme is precariousness. The second theme, on the other hand, is the pervasive theme of hope that undergirds not only the reading of the Haftarah and so much of the prophetic tradition, but the entire Jewish historical experience. In the Haftarah for this second day of Rosh Hashanah, the prophet Jeremiah, at a time of national calamity for the people of Israel, a time of uncertainty, affirms the words, Yesh tikva le'aharitech. There is future. There is a future. And these words inspire the Israeli national anthem, Hatikva, the hope. And this is what we affirm on this Rosh Hashanah, as we do every Rosh Hashanah, the possibilities, the promise of renewal, of new beginnings. We turn to the Torah service for this Shabbat, beginning on page 96.
In kamocha v'Elohim Adonai v'yin kema'asecha malchutecha malchut כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני עוז ימו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. אבהרה פנים, היטיבה רצונך את ציון. תבנה חומות ירושלים, כי בך לבד בטחנו. מלך עולם וניסן, אדון עולמי.
Please rise as the ark is opened and the Torahs are removed.
כי מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה, ודבר אדוני מירושלים. ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו.
Adonai, Adonai, God merciful and compassionate, patient, abounding in love and faithfulness, assuring love for thousands of generations, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and granting pardon.
Adonai, Adonai, erachum v'chanun, erech habayim, v'rav chesed v'yemet, nutzer chesed la'alafim, nusei avon v'fesha v'chata'a v'nageh. Adonai, Adonai, erachum v'chanun, erech habayim, v'rav chesed v'emet, nutzer chesed la'alafim, nusei avon v'fesha v'chata'a v'nageh.
May it be your will that you open my heart to your Torah, that you fill the desires of our hearts and the hearts of all your people Israel for goodness, for life, and for peace, as we now join in affirming the oneness of your name.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'norosh shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'norosh shemo.
Gadol Adonai iti, uneromema shemo yachdav.
You may be seated. It's Rabbi Dennis shared, our Torah reading this morning comes from the 22nd chapter of the book of Genesis and tells the story of that binding of Isaac. Today, we decided to keep it a little bit in the family. Yesterday, we are grateful to our board members who represented not only Beth-El but many communities that we are thinking about. And today, we're keeping it even closer in the family and asking the staff of our congregation to step forward and have a moment of aliyah, of sharing of space in Torah with our Torah reading this morning, which you can follow along with in the Machzor beginning on page 103. For our first aliyah, we'll call up our own Rabbi Dennis.
I will follow a Sephardic practice which introduces the aliyah with the blessing, Adonai imachem, may God be with you. And the congregation responds, Yevarechecha Adonai, may God's blessings be with you. And then the Torah blessing, Baruchu et Adonai hamvorach, Baruch Adonai hamvorach, leolam vaed, Baruch Adonai hamvorach, leolam vaed, Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kervanu la'avodato, ונתן לנו את תורתו, ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן. ויהי אחר הדברים האלה, והאלוהים נישא את אברהם, ויאמר אליו אברהם, ויאמר הנני. ויאמר קח נא את בנך את יחידך אשר אהבת את יצחק ולך לך אל ארץ המוריה והעלהו שם לעול הקהת ההרים אשר אומר אליך. וישכם אברהם בבוקר, ויחבוש את חמורו, ויקח את שני נעריו איתו ואת יצחק בנו, ויבקע עולה, ויקום וילך אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
For our second aliyah, we'll invite our own cantor Melissa, who keeps us always connected to our music. Rabbi Dennis keeps us in our Judaism, and cantor keeps us in our music. Second aliyah, cantor Melissa. Tamod Hashemit.
Baruch et Adonai HaMavorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Vaed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. ביום השלישי ויישא אברהם את עיניו, וירא את המקום מרחוק. ויאמר אברהם אל נעריו, שבו לכם בו עם החמור, ואני הנער נלכה עד כה ונשתחווה ונשוב עליכם. ויקח אברהם את עצי העולם, וישם אל יצחק בנו, ויקח בידו את האש ואת המאכלת, וילכו שניהם יחדיו. ויאמר יצחק אל אברהם אביו, ויאמר אבי, ויאמר הנני בני, ויאמר הנה האיש והעצים ויעשה לעולם. ויאמר אברהם אלוהים ירד אלוהסה לעולה בני, וילכו שניהם יחדיו. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
For our third Aliyah, we invite up George Kelly, our education director, who keeps our children connected.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirbanu le'avodato, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayavo el hamakom asher amar lo Elohim, vayivin Hashem Avraham et hamizbeach, vayarok et ha'etzim, vayakod et Yitzhak beno, vayasem oto al hamizbeach mimahal ha'etzim, vayishalach Avraham et yado, ויקח את המאכלת לשחוט את בנו, ויקרא אליו המלאך אדוני מן השמיים, ויאמר אברהם אברהם, ויאמר הנני, ויאמר אל תשלח ידך אל הנער, ואל תעש לו מאומה, כי אתה ידעתי כי ירא אלוהים אתה, ולא חסכת את בנך את יחידך ממני. ויישא אברהם את עיניו וירא, והנה איל אחר נאחז בסבך בקרניו, וילך אברהם ויקח את האיל ויעלהו לעולה תחת בנו, ויקרא אברהם שם המקום ההוא אדוני יראה, אשר יאמר היום כהר אדוני יראה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
For our fourth Aliyah, invites forward the first face many of us see when we walk into the office, the smile that greets us each morning and keeps our office going, Jennifer Hodes.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirbanu la'avodato, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. ויקרא מלאך אדוני אל אברהם שנית מן השמיים ויאמר בני שבתי נאום אדוני כי ין אשר עשית את הדבר הזה ולא חסכת את בנך את יחידך כי ברך אברכך והרבה את זרעך ככוכבי השמיים וככל אשר על שפת הים וירש זרעך את שער אויביו והתברכו בזרעך כל גויי הארץ עקב אשר שמעת בקולי וישוב אברהם אל נעריו ויקומו וילכו יחדיו אל באר שבר וישב אברהם בבאר שבר.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
And for our fifth Aliyah, we invite forward our social media coordinator and our communications coordinator, the one who truly keeps us all connected to you. We'll invite her to come from behind the scenes for just a moment as we honor our own Jackie Goldstein.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'kabarnu mikol ha'amin v'natan lanu et torato Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
אמן. ויהי אחרי הדברים האלה ויוגד לאברהם לאמור הנה ילדה מילכה גם היא בנים לנחור אחיך את עוץ בכורו ואת בוס אחיו ואת כמואל אבי ארם ואת כסד ואת חזו ואת פילדש ואת ידלף ואת בתואל ובתואל ילד את רבקה 8 ילדה מילכה לנחור אחי אברהם ופילגשו ושמה ראומה ותלד גם היא את טבח ואת גחם ואת הקש ואת מאכה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chaye olam nata betoheinu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Thank you all for your aliyot today, and thank you all for everything you do for the synagogue. And we are delighted also to have Bonnie Craig with us this morning. We are going to pause for a moment and rise, invite our president, Todd Maurer, to raise the Torah scroll.
Torah
asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai beyad Moshe.
Torah, 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 Tivana Moshe. Torah, Torah, Torah,
like to invite you, as the Torah rests, to turn to the chanting of the Haftarah for this Shabbat, for this Rosh Hashanah second day on page 111. And it is my pleasure to invite Rabbi Jenny Greenspan, Harav Chava Rachel, Bat Yogav Sender, Veleika Miriam, to gift us with the prophetic reading, the Haftarah. Please follow on page 111. Rabbi Jenny will be chanting the beginning verses through verse 7, and then picking up at the conclusion on page 113 at verse 17. Yesh tikva, there is hope.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratza v'direihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'b'Moshe avdo u'b'Yisrael amo u'b'nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek.
Amen.
Ko amar Adonai matzachein b'midbar am suridei charev haloch lehargi'o Yisrael. Merachok Adonai nira li ve'ahavti olam ahavtich al ken meshachti chesed od evnech v'nivneit betulat Yisrael od tadit upayich vayatzat bimchol mesachakim od tit'i charamim בהרי שומרון נטעו נוטעים וחיללו כי יש יום קראו נוצרים בהר אפרים קומי נעלה ציון אל אדוני אלוהינו כי כה אמר אדוני רנו ליעקב שמחה וצהלו בראש הגויים השמיעו הללו ואמרו הושיע אדוני את עמך את שירת ישראל יש תקווה לאחריתך נאום אדוני ושבו בנים לגבולם שמוע שמעתי אפרים מתנודד יסרטני ויבשר כעגל לא לומד השיבני ואשובה כי אתה אדוני אלוהי כי אחרי שובי נחמתי ואחרי היוודעי ספקתי על ירך בושתי גם נכלמתי כי נשאתי חרפת נעורי הבן יכיר לי אפרים אם ילד שעשועים כי מדי דברי בו זכו אזכרנו עוד על כן המו מאי לא רחם ארחמנו נאום אדוני ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם סור כל העולמים צדיק בכל הדורות האל הנאמן האומר ועושה המדבר ומקיים שכל דבריו אמת וצדק נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ונאמנים דבריך ודבר אחד מדבריך אחור לא ישוב ריקם כי אל מלך נאמן ורחמן אתה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הנאמן וכל דבריו רחם על ציון כי היא בית חיינו, ולעלובת נפש תושיע במהרה מימינו, ברוך אתה אדוני. משמח ציון בבניה. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו באליהו הנביא עבדך, ובמלכות בית דוד משיחך, במהרה יבוא ויגל ליבנו, על כיסו לא ישב זר, ולא ינחלו עוד אחרים את כבודו, כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו, שלא יכבה נרו לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני. מגן דוד. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום הזיכרון הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד, ונברך אמת וקיים לעד, ברוך אתה אדוני. היי 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 מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל. מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל. מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל, ביום הזיכרון.
Thank you, Cantor Melissa, Rabbi Jenny, and all who participated in the Torah service this morning. We turn to the Shofar service at this time. There are two moments when the shofar is sounded traditionally during the Rosh Hashana service, one at the end of the Torah, as we are about to do in a few moments, and then later during the Musaf service. The sounding of the shofar is divided into three parts, which celebrate the themes of Malchuyot, creation, divine sovereignty, Zichronot, remembrance, revelation, and Shofarot, the eventual revelation and proclamation of the redemption of the world. At this moment, as we did yesterday, we will have an abbreviated sounding of the shofar in consideration of our special circumstances. You may go to our website, and there you will find a YouTube with Fred Schwab with a comprehensive blowing of the shofar. Last night we had the opportunity during Tashlich also to blow the shofar outdoors around the Kulwin Pond in the presence of a significant number of congregants of all ages who gathered to do Tashlich. So at this point, I call your attention that there are many names for this holiday. The most common, Rosh Hashanah, in fact, is not the most original or earliest name. It does not appear in the Bible. It is a name that is given to the holiday post-biblically. The holiday is also known as Yom Hadin, the Day of Judgment. It is known as Yom HaZikaron, the Day of Remembrance, a constant theme of the holiday. It is known as Yom Harat Olam, the day when the world was created, and it is significantly for this moment known as Yom Teruah, the day of the sounding of the shofar. We turn to that with a brief introductory reading on page 118. May the cry of the shofar shatter our complacency. May the cry of the shofar penetrate our souls. May the cry of the shofar break the bonds of all that enslaves us. May the cry of the shofar destroy the idols we place at the front of our lives. May the cry of the shofar awaken us to how we have transgressed. May the cry of the shofar summon us to a life of responsibility. May the cry of the shofar elicit from us the response, "Here I am." Min HaMeitzar, page 119.
Min HaMeitzar karatiya anani b'merchavya koli shama al ta'alim usnecha ללבחתי לשבתי.
If you are able to rise for the sounding of the shofar, please do so at this moment. The cantor will chant the blessings.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו לשמוע קול שופר. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
Tekiah. Shevarim Truah. Tekiah Gedolah. Ashrei ha'am yod'ei tru'ah, joyous are the people who experience the calling of the shofar. Adonai, they walk by the light of your presence. They continually rejoice in your name and are exalted through your righteousness. Continue on page 121.
יהללו את שם אדוני, כי נשגב שמו לבדו. עודו על ארץ בשמיים, וירם כן לעמו, תהילה לכל חסידיו, לפני ישראל עם גרובו. הללויה, הללויה. יצרים היא למחזיקים בה בתומכיה מאושר. דרכיה תרחינם וכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה. קדיש, קדיש ימינו, קדיש ימינו כקדם.
You may be seated. So, when I was a child, growing up in Southern California, my family held a membership at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. We loved the wonder, the beauty, the majesty of the ocean that was just off our coast. Cute sea otters, huge, strange-looking sunfish, teeming kelp forests, graceful jellyfish. You get the idea. I absolutely loved those trips, and to this day, one of my favorite places to go when I visit a new city is the aquarium. What I didn't love as a kid was the drive to actually get to the Monterey Bay Aquarium and to nearby Carmel, where we sometimes stayed. Yes, Carmel. Carmel is here in Indiana. Carmel, California has at most one roundabout. For those of you who may not be as familiar with the geography of California, Monterey is about 360 miles north of my childhood home in the San Fernando Valley. It's roughly a 6-hour drive without stops. As kids, my sister and I, of course, had no real concept of what 6 hours in the car felt like. It just felt long. You might be excited to get there, excited to see the sea otters again, but the seemingly endless car ride would eventually get boring, get old. It would get burdensome. We would start to get anxious, not knowing when we would be getting out of the car ever again. Eventually, we would tire of the little state license plate bingo peg game that we had in the car. We get bored of playing with our stuffed animals, and we would flat refuse to keep looking for Volkswagen Beetles of any color. You know what one of us would say next. You can say it with me. Are we there yet? I have to admit, much of this pandemic has felt somewhat like being that little child on a long car ride again. Bored, constrained, desperate for a change, a return to something familiar or normal. Briefly over the summer, we thought we were done. We thought we'd gotten there. We thought we had arrived in Monterey. And then the Delta variant arrived on the scene. Sometime in early August, headlines started reading something along the lines of the CDC noting that even vaccinated individuals can carry enough of a viral load to infect others, recommends that even vaccinated individuals resume wearing masks in public, especially when indoors. Large gatherings are not recommended. I was suddenly a small child in the backseat of my parents' first-generation Honda Odyssey again, with no real understanding of time, and feeling like I was never going to get off of Highway 101 ever again. We had not apparently gotten there yet. We'd apparently just pulled off of the road for lunch in Santa Barbara. Also a beautiful beach town, but not where we were trying to go. Not the new, beautiful normal we're trying to accomplish. And now we've been asked to get back in the car. Like small children, we don't really know how long we're going to be back in the car because 1 hour already felt like 3. 3 more sounds absolutely unbearable. If I were a small child still, I might actually have thrown a temper tantrum. Are we there yet? But we Jews are actually used to this. We're a people of constant journeying and waiting, of never quite getting there. Our Torah reading works this way. Ever notice that the Israelites in the Torah never actually arrive in the Promised Land after wandering in the wilderness for 40 years? If you've ever wondered why you can't quite remember hearing the end of our story when our ancestors get there, don't worry. It's not actually because you haven't come to Shabbat morning services enough in the final months before the high holidays. It's because it doesn't happen in the Torah. That piece of the story is reserved for the book of Joshua, which is the first book of the prophets section of our Bible, after the Torah. And it's actually a book we never read in full as part of our liturgical cycle. The redemption end of the story piece is for later. Our prayers, too, constantly cycle through 3 major themes of our story: creation of the world and its renewal each day, God's rescuing us from bondage of Egypt, and revelation of Torah and our partnership with God. And redemption is still yet to come, still in the future, still and always ahead of us. For millennia, Jews have written about the coming of the Mashiach, of God's anointed one. He will someday come, when the world is ready. From the Bible through to writings in our own century, Jewish literature is littered with this yearning, with hope for the day when the world will be its best self, deserving of that gift, when we are peaceful and loving, when we will honor our tradition and our fellow Jews, our fellow human beings, and all of this creation. For Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, often called the Rambam, that yearning and hope is a principle of faith. I believe by complete faith and in the coming of the Messiah, and even though he tarry in waiting, in spite of that, I will still wait expectantly for him each day, knowing he will one day come, knowing we'll get there. For Rambam, faith is waiting for something, yearning and striving for it, and accepting it might not happen in his own lifetime. At the core of this principle of faith is finding it in us to hope, even when it feels like we've run out of steam for that hoping. COVID, I think, has taught us, or at least me, this feeling quite well. Waiting, hoping, longing, and knowing we will never be the same. Our world is forever shifted. We have experienced irreplaceable losses. We will be forever marked by this particular long and unexpected and very bumpy road trip. So what do we do when we're tired of license plate bingo? When there aren't any more slug bugs on the road, because they're all still at home too? How do we find resilience when we feel like we're stuck in the back seat of our parents' minivan? We look for sources of hope. We look for reminders that help us weather the difficult journey. We can do it with external reminders, with internal distractions, and by speaking with one another, making room for pain, both theirs and our own. One way we could find hope is to set ourselves reminders of what can be ahead of us. It might sound counterintuitive to put something in front of you to remind you of where you were, what you are missing, to constantly see what you want back, but it can also serve as a reminder that it can come again. Fond memories offer hope for the future. Those times can come again. There's a story told in Pesikta de Rav Kahana of a young woman who married a king, and that king wrote her a beautiful and loving ketubah, his marriage contract to her. In it, he laid out his love for her and all that he hoped to give her in their lives together. But early in their marriage, he was forced to journey away and ends up being gone much longer than he'd originally expected. In the ancient world, since there was no means for distant communication, it was considered acceptable that if a husband was gone for too long, that a woman was allowed to presume him dead and remarry, since she had no means for resources of her own. And so many people would come to this young wife and say to her, "Why do you not remarry? Why do you waste your youth waiting for your king, your husband who's probably never coming back?" But she refused to remarry. When she started to feel hopeless, she would instead pull out her ketubah and read it again and again, and remember the love and joy for which she was waiting and hoping to have come back. It would renew her patience. It would reignite her hope. Rav Kahana is perfectly in step with Rambam. This young bride is supposed to be a metaphor for the Jewish people, and the ketubah is a metaphor for our Torah. We read it again and again, letting it remind us of the love that God has for us, letting it renew our hope for a better tomorrow, for that eventual redemption, whether at the hands of a literal Messiah or by the work that we will do to create the peaceful world in which he's supposed to appear. But I think we could read that ketubah as a metaphor for any physical sign that can offer us a reminder of hope. I invite you to think, what is yours? Perhaps it's a souvenir of a favorite place that you've gone on vacation, a reminder of beautiful memories that you had there, a reminder that someday we might actually go again, and even if not, its memories still bring you joy and hope. Perhaps it's photos of the family you haven't been able to see a while, but which remind you of who you are at your best self. Maybe if it's not even physical, maybe it's a song that transports you to a better place in time. Perhaps it's just the scenery out the window of the van, seeing that the seasons have changed, remembering that time is moving forward, that we are still in the car, but that the clock isn't actually frozen at 3:07 p.m. This minute is just taking longer than we thought it would. Because seeing changes, noticing that progress is possible, is another source of hope. Often in life, we tend to ignore things that don't change much. Ever had a save the date or a piece of your child's artwork attached to your refrigerator for so long that it became invisible? It's actually an evolutionary feature of our psychology. The world can be so full of constant stimuli that we must be able to filter out some of them to catch what is important and to catch what we need to pay attention to. And things that don't change much are often the things that first get filtered out. But when too little is progressing, it's hard to keep noticing the important and exciting things in front of us. We start to feel a sense of despair, being stuck in one place, and forget that progress has been made, that we know more about this virus than we did a year ago, even if it feels like we're stuck back in the same car. Even if it feels like we're in the same place when our in-person services once again shifted to live stream. Perhaps that's why there are so many different blasts of our shofar. That variation wakes us up asks us to look at the world anew. Look out your car window, the shofar says. I know you think you still just see road, but look past that. You see groves of trees, fields and farms, cows roaming open land. The journey is long, but you are moving. You can make it if you just hold on a bit longer and find hope. What about when looking out the window doesn't feel like enough? There's so much anxiety, fear, uncertainty, and true loss that we struggle to look up and look out the window on our own. In Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, a verse reads, "Ze'aga belev ish yashchena, v'davar tov yisamchena." If there is anxiety, a worry, a pain in a person's heart, let them quash it and turn it to joy with a good word. The rabbis of the Talmud seek to understand how one is supposed to quash pain. How is it turned to joy with a good word? Yashchena, meaning to quash or force down. It does mean to quash or to force down. And so Rabbi Ami in the Talmud says the way to deal with pain or anxiety is to suppress it, push it down, set it aside, force it out of your mind. Rabbi Asi, on the other hand, shifts the vowels on the word and makes it into yesichena. You should talk about it. If you have a worry, talk about it. Brings in the davar tov, the good word. The two rabbis offer seemingly opposite suggestions for dealing with our pains and anxieties. Push them out of our minds or talk about them. In either case, the goal seems to be to make room for this good word, to make room for joy. Rabbi Shmuel Eliezer of Edel is often called the Maharsha, lived in 16th century Poland. In his commentary entitled Chidushei Agadot, he attempts to spell out the two suggestions a little bit further. He says, to force it out of your mind is so that you can study Torah. I read this as telling us, when it feels like our pains and anxieties are so overwhelming that we can't think about anything else, we should stop our thoughts in our tracks. This is a trick for cognitive behavioral therapists as well. Stop the thought in its tracks and throw ourselves instead at worthy work. Perhaps that is Torah for you, finding divine inspiration and growth from the wisdom of so many of our ancestors and teachers. Perhaps that work is political action, throwing yourself into the work of creating a better world. Perhaps it is volunteer work, perhaps it's your job, perhaps it's a creative endeavor, maybe one you've done for years, or maybe one you've been learning since this pandemic began. Any of these can allow you to work through pain as you siphon the energy into that worthy work, and that might help hope return. Sometimes, to address a fear, we set it aside, throw ourselves into worthy work, and let that work give hope. And sometimes the pain and the struggle is too big to just distract it away. And so we turn to Rabbi Asi's reread of the verse. We talk about it. We tell it to others. Maharsha says that's to seek advice, but I think it's more than just seeking advice. Sometimes we need the space to verbally express what's going on with us with the help of someone we trust, maybe a close friend, a family member, a therapist. We make the space to speak aloud what is weighing on our soul and invite another to help us examine it, to offer a perspective from outside of our own heads, to help us spot what we might have missed, to help us find a way to take a step forward, to help us find hope. I find it tremendously helpful that dealing with pain and feeling stuck and finding hope anyway is something that has been revisited so many times over our many centuries. From the book of Proverbs, to the Talmud, to 16th century Poland, to the here and now. We may be dealing with new sources of anxiety and new causes of hopelessness, but dealing with them is human. That alone gives me hope. We have always struggled with anxieties and painful journeys. We have always sought ways to make it tolerable. Neither the Talmud nor Chidushei Agadot try to say which of the two approaches is the correct way to read our proverb, because they both know that each is correct in its own time. At times, we figure out how to discern which is the right approach to find hope in a given moment, each time. Is the anxiety brought on by the length of this car ride something I need to just set aside and do something else? Maybe practice that new skill I learned in the pandemic? Or have I already made too much sourdough, and I really need to call a friend I haven't spoken to in a while? On the other hand, we are all still in this car. It's possible I may have already siphoned off too much of my stress into someone I love, only to find it's still festering in me. Maybe it is time to throw my energy into something else, into a creative process that I can allow to pull my focus and accomplish hope. Both of these suggestions can help us make room for a good word, whether we discover that it's in the distraction or in the words shared with another. To me, the crux of the passage is quite simple. It is human to have moments of despair and hopelessness, but giving in to them, letting that hopelessness fester, will eat at our spiritual roots. When we experience trials, we need only to seek help in finding hope. Since Rosh Chodesh Elul, beginning of our previous Hebrew month, Jews the world over have recited Psalm 27 daily. That psalm concludes, Kaveh el Adonai, chazek ve'ya'ametz libecha, v'kaveh el Adonai. Hope in God, be strong and brave of heart, and hope in God. When you are struggling to find hope, strengthen your heart and look for it outside yourself. With help from one another and from God, we can strengthen our hearts. We can find a way to help release, or at least set aside for a time, our anxiety. And in doing so, may we find the way to align ourselves with hope. A friend and colleague of mine, Rabbi Rafi Spitzer, told me that there's a funny, kind of counterintuitive thing about human nature that he noticed. Admitting you feel stuck is the first step to getting unstuck. Admitting you feel powerless is the first step to noticing the power you do have. I think with this psalm, the reminder of hope, and I have needed it more this year than any other, I find the same tendency with hopelessness. Recognizing that I feel hopeless is the first step to addressing it, and to looking for those ways to help find it. When I realize I feel hopeless, I know it's time to search for hope. We have been on this road a long, long time. When we stopped for lunch, we thought we were there, and unfortunately, we weren't yet. And realizing that may have led to a new round of despair, anxiety, and hopelessness. But I'm doing my best to align myself with hope. We saw that life beyond this pandemic is possible. There is more work to be done, and there are more problems to address beyond the pandemic, and there is more time left in the thick of this pandemic than we thought. But life beyond is possible if we hold on to hope. I don't know when we'll get there. I, unfortunately, am not the parent driving this minivan, nor can I predict the roadblocks that might continue to slow us down. But I am in the car with you, and I think we can help one another find the hope and survive it. I'll place my reminders of better times out in front of me and help you set out yours. Sometimes we'll feel like playing games to distract ourselves, and sometimes we won't. Sometimes we'll be willing and ready to share what is going on in our hearts with one another, and sometimes we won't. Sometimes the best we'll be able to do is just gaze out the windows together for a bit. But we'll be together for the ride, and we'll keep supporting one another and hoping together through the whole journey, supporting one another as we experience new rounds of pain and loss. I align myself with hope. I do have faith that someday we will make it to Monterey, if we can hold on together and help one another through it. To borrow yesterday's, I am, because we are we. It might just be our best trip to Monterey yet. Shana tova, metuka, betikva. We have a good year, and a sweet year, and a hopeful year. Continue our service with the Chatzi Kaddish, on the bottom of page 123. Please rise.
V'yitkadosh Shemei Rabbah B'yalma Divrei Chirutei B'yamelich Malchutei B'chayichum Uvyomechom Uvechayim Techol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala Uvizman Karim וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה ולעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה וימירו
We continue on page 143 with the introduction to the Untitled prayer. Let us speak of the sacred power of this day, profound and awe-inspiring it. On it, your sovereignty is established, from which you rule in truth, and your throne established through love. Untitled Tokef, page 143.
Untitled Tokef, Kedushat Hayom, Ki hu noda ve'ayom, uvot inaseh malchutecha, v'ikon bechesed kisecha, v'teshev alav be'emet.
On Rosh Hashana it is written, and on the fast day of Yom Kippur it is sealed. Berosh Hashana.
Berosh Hashana yikatevun, u'v'yom Tzom Kippur yikatevun, kama yavrum v'chama yivarehun, michye yomi yamut, mi v'kitzo u'mi lo v'kitzo. Berosh Hashana yikatevun, u'v'yom Tzom Kippur yikatevun.
A meditation I have adapted from a prayer by my colleague Rabbi Joseph Mesler. On Rosh Hashanah it is written, on Yom Kippur it is sealed, that some will live and some will die. But amidst overwhelming forces of nature and humankind, we write our own book of life, and our actions are its words. And the stages of our lives are the chapters, and nothing goes unrecorded. Every deed counts, everything we do matters. We never know what act or word will leave an impression or tip the scale. So if not now, then when? For the things we can change, there is teshuvah, the possibility of renewal. For the things we cannot change, there is tefillah, the comfort of prayer. For the help we can give, there is tzedakah, the gift of righteousness. Together, let us write our book of life for future generations to seal and for the Holy One to approve. But repentance, prayer, and good deeds, Teshuvah, Tefillah, Tzedakah, have the power to change the character of our lives. We remain standing for the introduction to the Aleinu, the great Aleinu, written for the Rosh Hashanah service, page 154.
לשבח לאדון הגדול, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות אדמות, שלא שם חלקנו גן בגורלנו ככולם עונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלוכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Our Musaf contains 3 blessings of the Shofar services. Middle section we are about to read through, each containing one of the basic themes of the day: Malchuyot, kingship; Zichronot, remembrance; and Shofarot, the shofar. It can be summed up as follows: God rules us, Malchuyot; God remembers us, Zichronot; and God listens to us, Shofarot. Together, we and God are reminded God is on this journey of life with us. We begin on page 157, the Malchuyot.
Eloheinu ve'Elokei Avotenu, kadoshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'tein chelkeinu b'toratecha, saveinu mituvecha, v'samechenu b'shupatecha, v'tahir livenu leotecha, באמת, כי אתה אלוהים אמת, ודברך אמת, וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני.
ברוך הוא ברוך שמו.
איי 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 מלך על כל הארץ, מקדיש ישראל. מלך על כל הארץ, מקדיש ישראל. איי 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 מלך על כל הארץ, מקדיש ישראל. מלך על כל הארץ, מקדיש ישראל. מלך על כל הארץ, מקדיש ישראל, ביום הזיכרון.
Purify our hearts to serve you truly, for you are the God of truth. Your word is true, eternal and unchanging. Baruch atah Adonai, ruler of all the earth, who makes the people of Israel and the day of remembrance holy. Include with Areshet, page 158. Let's turn to page 161. Forgetfulness leads to exile, while remembrance is the secret of redemption. Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin asked, "What is the worst thing the evil urge can achieve?" And he answered, "To make a person forget that one is the child of a king." Now we continue with Beth-El Yedei in Hebrew on page 161.
ועל ידי עבדך הנביאים כתוב לאמור, הלוך וקראת באוזני ירושלים לאמור, כה אמר אדוני, זכרתי לך חסד נעורייך, אהבת כלולותייך. לך תחקרי במדבר, בארץ לא זרועה, ונאמר, וזכרתי אני את בריתי אותך, בנעורייך, בהקימותי לך, ברית עולם
May we never abandon our memories. May our memories inspire deeds which lead us to life and love, to blessing and peace.
כי זוכר כל הנשכחות אתה הוא מעולם, ואין שכחה לפני כיסא כבודך, ועקדת יצחק לזרעו היום, לזרעו היום, ברחמים תזכור, ברוך אתה אדוני,
ברוך שמו.
זוכר הברית.
Amen. May the words of our lips be pleasing to you, exalted God, who listens, discerns, considers, and attends to the sound of our shofar blast. Lovingly accept our offering of verses proclaiming your remembrance. The blasts of the shofar on Rosh Hashana revitalize the soul and mind of every Jew. Each one receives a new soul and a new level of understanding, all according to their own level. This new soul and vision are drawn from the inner countenance of God. Continue on page 165 with the Shofar service.
Hallelu, hallelu, Beth-EL tzarei shama. Hallelu, hallelu, Beth-EL tzarei truah. Kol haneshama tehallelya. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol haneshama tehallelya. Hallelujah, hallelujah. כי אתה שומע קול שופר ונרסין תרועה וינדום אליו. ברוך אתה אדוני,
ברוך שמו.
שומע קול תרועת עמו ישראל, רחמים.
Tekiah. Shivarim Truah. Tekiah Gedolah.
ארשת שפתנו ירב לפניך, ארם ונישא. ארשת שפתנו ירב לפניך, ארם ונישא. מבין ומביט ומקשיב לכל תקיעתנו. ותקבל ברחמים, ברחמים וברצון, סדר סדר שופרותנו.
Today the world stands at birth. Today all creation is called to judgment, whether as your children or as your servants. If as your children, be compassionate with us, as a parent is compassionate with children. If, as your servants, we look to you expectantly, waiting for you to be gracious to us, and as day emerges from night, bring forth a favorable judgment on our behalf, awe-inspiring Holy One.
And now as we reach, we're not there yet, but we are reaching the conclusion of the service as we continue the journey into the new year. So we turn to page 170 and invite those who are able to rise as the ark is opened, and we join in the singing of Hayom, today, today.
Hayom te'yomseinu, hayom te'varchinu, hayom te'gadleinu, amen. Hayom titrashenu letova, amen, amen. Hayom tichtavenu l'chaim, chaim tovim, amen. Hayom tishma shavatenu, amen, amen. Hayom tikabel berakamim, uvratzon et tefilatenu, amen. Hayom titbechenu, bimin sitkecha, amen, 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 amen.
Today strengthen us, today bless us, today inscribe us for a good life in the book of life. As the ark is closed, I ask you to remain standing, and we turn to Aleinu, page 173.
עלינו לשבח לדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא הבראשית, שלא עשינו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגוררנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו גודלים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שעונת שמיים ויוסד ארץ ומושב יקרו בשמיים מבעל כן הקבל לך אדוני אלוהינו ולגופתי תצדקה ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ושמו
Mourners and those who observe the yahrzeit for a loved one, and all who remember, please rise for the Kaddish. And we turn to page 174. As on this holiest of days, we remember loved ones, friends, for whom we have been separated by death, but to whom we remain close through the bonds of memory. We honor the memories also of all who have died in the year past, victims to this national and world pandemic. We are grateful for the gift of memory, for the ability to retain in treasured possession that which we once held dear. Above all, we are grateful for the assurance that there is no forgetting before the Holy One, that our loved ones are held in everlasting remembrance. May the memories of all whom we honor inspire us to lead lives worth remembering. In tribute to our departed, we now recite the words of the Kaddish. Yitkadal ve'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Be'olma divra kiriute ve'yamlich malchute. Bechayekon uviomekon uvechaye dekol Beit Israel. Ba'agala uvizman kariv ve'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam uleolmei olmaya. יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומן ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה ולעילה, מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דא אמירן בעלמה, ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמן. May God, the source of peace, grant comfort to all who are bereaved, peace to the household of Israel, and to all humanity. And let us say, Amen. May be seated. My pleasure to invite our President, Todd Maurer, to extend greetings and make some announcements.
Thank you, Rabbi. L'Shana Tova to you all. I'd like to begin by thanking Rabbi Dennis, Rabbi Jenny, and Cantor Melissa for leading us in this morning's Rosh Hashanah service. As we look forward to Yom Kippur, if you are interested in having a name included in our prayer for healing on Yom Kippur services, please contact the synagogue office. Also, please check our website for information and links to both our Kol Nidre and Yom Kippur services. And make sure to tune in on Yom Kippur afternoon at 4 o'clock for a Zoom conversation with Dr. David Nierenberg of the University of Chicago on anti-Semitism then and now. The text from the sermon you heard today and yesterday and on Yom Kippur will be available on the synagogue website and on Facebook at the conclusion of the holiday season. Also, while you're visiting our website, please check out the many offerings with the Alan and Linda Cohen Center for Jewish Learning and Living and a variety of other programs and events for everyone. On behalf of my wife, Linda, and my children, the officers and the board of directors, I want to wish you all a year filled with health, peace, and joy. L'Shana Tova.
Turn now to page 175 as we close with the Don Olam, and then stay for a moment after for some closing words. Page 175.
Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra leitnasa b'chepzo kol azay melech shemo nikra b'yachari kiklu taqul levado yimloch nora ve'hu haya ve'hu ve'hu yeh b'tifara b'yado afkid ruchi ve'tishan ve'ayira ve'imruchi kiriati Adonai li ve'lo ira.
Kaveh el Adonai, chazek ve'ametz libecha ve'kaveh el Adonai. Wait for Adonai. Fill your waiting with hope in Adonai. Let your heart be strong and of good courage, and wait hopefully for Adonai. Adonai, as we ride on all of these long, long journeys of life, we ride with you. There is much waiting. We wait for minutes that seem like hours, hours that seem like days, days that are like weeks, which feel like months and even years. As you drive us forward, help us to hold on to hope. Help us to trust that you will care for us. Help us to know that we are nurtured and loved. And we will sit in this back seat, holding on to one another, knowing that someday, if we can dare to hope, you will help us arrive to where we're meant to be. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.